Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to our PettyRevenge series. Sometimes in life, you just want those little victories because not everybody deserves to have their lives crumble, right? In this episode, you're going to hear 10 petty revenge stories. The first story features an original poster, or OP, dealing with a road rager. The second story involves an OP going to war against their neighbors. The third story is about a hostess making a Karen feel horrible about herself. Fourth is a story where someone messes with laundry. I hope you enjoy the stories today, my friends. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories in the future. Let's dive in. To start off, my entire adult life, people have thought I was a cop, or that I look like one. I have a shaved head because I'm balding, I'm tall, and I guess I'm kind of imposing. I'm obviously not a cop, and I'm not a gun owner or anything like that, so there's no cop wannabe vibe here. I simply get mistaken for a cop a lot. I've never pretended to be one or acted on it in any real way either. So I'm driving along a road in town, approaching a stoplight where I see a minivan stopped in the left lane. The right lane is occupied too, and a small sports car is rolling behind the minivan. As I'm slowing down, I watch the light change to green. In an instant, the guy in the convertible sports car starts honking, just laying on the horn. I can see the minivan has a mom in it, and she's dealing with some kids. She didn't cause any major delay in moving the van forward, but this guy is already blaring his horn. What a jerk, I'm thinking. Then, he whips his car around her to the left, into oncoming traffic, and nearly causes an accident. He passes her, and as the traffic picks up speed, he's in front of the van and abruptly stops for no reason, forcing her to slam on her brakes and nearly rear-end him. I just so happen to be in the right lane, getting a perfect view of all this ridiculous behavior. Just as he's looking into his rearview mirror, smiling with his middle finger out the window, I pull up right beside him with my window down. Pointing at him in my most booming voice, I say, "You!" He turns around, looks at me, and his smile evaporates as his eyes widen. I say, "Pull over onto the next street, park your car, and wait for a uniformed officer. Do not leave the scene." To my surprise, he nods, takes a left, and pulls over. I slowly cruise past him and repeat, "Do not leave the scene." I laugh to myself about how quickly this guy's road rage went from a smug smile to pure panic. Then I go on my way to get my groceries. Here's the best part. I have to drive by the same spot 45 minutes later on my way back, and he's still there. He's out of the car now, leaning on it, looking frustrated at the no-show cop. This was a marvelous petty revenge. At first, when I read this, I thought, okay, that's a good revenge, but isn't impersonating a cop illegal? Then I realized that the OP never once said he was an officer or even implied it. He basically just told the guy to pull over to the side of the road, wait for the police, and not leave the scene. Absolutely brilliant. I love this comment right here. On behalf of van-driving moms everywhere, thank you for putting him in timeout. And holy cow, did he ever put him in timeout. Guys, I wonder how long that guy waited before he realized no officer was coming. How long would you wait before you bailed from the scene? Next story. Many years ago, we innocently bought a house next door to a retired Marine couple. She was about 6 feet 2 inches tall and strongly resembled Arnold Schwarzenegger in his current state, while he was about 5 feet 7 inches and probably weighed 130 pounds. They were very house and yard proud and thoroughly obnoxious about it. After living next to them for a short time, for some unknown reason, they decided to mount a campaign of general obnoxiousness against us. It started small. A note on a friend's car saying he was 3 inches over on their side when he parked on the street in front of our house. Then it escalated rapidly. They reported us to animal control for having farm animals inside city limits, our 2 Shih Tzus, which, by the way, were not used to pull a plow. They reported us to the health department for leaving our pool with a small amount of water in it, claiming it was breeding mosquitoes. They also reported us for repairing our fence without a permit, even though we weren't moving it, tearing it down, or replacing it. We merely nailed some boards back up. They reported us for loud parties, quiet parties, and even no parties at all. They called City Hall so often that it became a joke among the staff there. All the while, they continued with small harassments. We ignored all of this, just making sure we had an extra plate for whatever city official they called out that day. But then they committed the ultimate crime. One lovely morning, while we were breakfasting on the patio, I happened to look over and see a sprayer nozzle come through the fence slats. They sprayed poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Now we love our salsa, and I make an absolutely exquisite fresh salsa. They dared to spray poison on my tomato and jalapeno plants. Poison my tomatoes and peppers, will you? In Texas, that's practically a capital offense, but sadly, we didn't live in Texas, so I was forced to devise my own punishment. One thing about their house was that it must have been built on an ant hill. They constantly fought ants, and we regularly heard them complaining about them as they tried to rid their backyard of the pests. Our homes were built as patio homes, all with lovely large patios and huge kitchen windows with sliding glass doors. So, I made a very large batch of simple syrup and froze it in ice cube trays. My friends and I would sit on our patio and toss the ice cubes, creating a point system that ranged from getting the cubes onto their patio to landing them against the base of the sliding door to getting them on the counter and up against the window opening. We gave them ants, lots of ants. Not being particularly close neighbors, the Marines gave us no warning when they went on vacation. We did notice it got quieter, and I didn't overhear any further discussions between them about the sticky mess that regularly showed up on their patio, but I didn't really think about it. Besides, I was behind on points, so the bombardment continued. The ants celebrated. They sent out telegrams worldwide inviting all their relatives to move. They had found paradise, the grass was green, and there were regular supply drops. They invaded. There were tiny black ants, larger brown ants, and big red ants. They built neighborhoods of tiny ant cities. Ant Rockettes did the can-can across the counter, and they held parades. There were Friday night fiestas with live ant mariachi bands. It was beautiful. I went through 3 5-pound bags of sugar. We knew exactly when the Marines got home from their 6-week cruise. We could tell by the screeches of anguish. Apparently, the ants had made their way inside. There were screams from the kitchen, the pantry, the laundry room, and the bathroom. It was ear-shattering. Who knew a 5'7" man could make those sounds? The battle was on. The army ants dug foxholes and built redoubts. The fire ants formed a special forces team with close protection units. The war raged for months. Despite regular resupply, the ants were eventually decimated, though the Marines were seen collapsed in patio chairs, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. Their once pristine backyard closely resembled the aftermath of a battlefield. Peace talks were held, and a détente was achieved, until the Marines got their second wind and reinforcements in the form of their son, Marine Jr. Further shenanigans ensued, and I discovered that raccoons are not only exceedingly dexterous, but also surprisingly fond of overripe figs. But that's another tale. Now, that's a great way to get back at your neighbors? I feel like this petty revenge is bordering on pro-revenge territory. It was a super calculated plan and caused the neighbors a ton of headache and grief. I couldn't imagine my house being invaded by ants. I might have to burn the place down at that point or just move. I also love how the OP said they had 2 Shih Tzus, but they weren't used to pull plows. Why not? They totally could. It sounds absolutely adorable. Next story. This happened about a year ago when I worked in the restaurant business as a hostess. Often we'd get people who were upset about call-ahead seating. Now, call-ahead seating is not a reservation. It's a way to get ahead on the waiting list if you call in advance. I'd often get people angry about having to wait even though they thought they'd made a reservation. One time a Karen came in with, I'm assuming, her husband. She had slightly longer hair than the typical Karen haircut but was extremely rude. I also have to mention that she was a bit on the larger side. At this restaurant, we had 2-person booths and 4-person booths. I'd often try to accommodate larger guests by seating them in a 4-person booth. One night we were extremely busy with a 2-page waiting list. Karen came in about 30 minutes after her call ahead was listed, and she was around the middle of the list. I sat a few tables before her when she came up to me complaining, "We have a reservation. Why is it taking so long? This is ridiculous." I explained that it's a call ahead, not a reservation, and she was further ahead on the list than people who arrived before her. She went back and sat down. About 15 minutes later, she came up again, even angrier. I explained it would only be about 15 more minutes. Now, Karen was getting really upset, saying, "I told you we should have gone to another restaurant nearby." At this point, I was tired. I'd worked 10 hours, and honestly, I felt like if I was going to be at this job, I should at least have one story to take with me when I left. I saw a 2-person booth had opened up. I said, "Ma'am, we have a 2-person booth that just opened up. I'd be happy to seat you there if that's okay." She gave a smug grin as if she'd won, which made me feel a little better about what I was about to do. I took her to an open part of the restaurant, in view of most people there, placed their menus down, and sat back to watch. She frowned a bit, but I guess wanted to prove something. She got about halfway into the booth before her stomach hit the table, which was bolted to the floor. She grunted and groaned, finally getting in with about a third of her leg hanging out and her stomach slightly on the table. I saw a few people around watching, probably in amusement or shock. Her husband then asked if they could get another table, and Karen said nothing. I told her husband, sure, I'm sorry this one didn't work. To be fair, he was nice the whole time, just keeping his head down and waiting. Poor guy. I brought them back to the lounge to wait, and she didn't say a word until I finally called them for a 4-person booth. This is probably one of the meanest things I've done in my life, but hey, it's hard to get some petty revenge just being the hostess. I'm actually speechless, and many people in the comment section of the post are divided. Some say the OP went too far by using Karen's size for her own amusement, while others say she 100% deserved it. One commenter said, "She needed that embarrassment, otherwise she would have continued harassing you." My friends, do you agree or disagree with what the OP did? Judging by the comments, many hostesses have done something similar to rude, overly demanding customers who get in their face. Next story. I used to be kind of a jerk, but I've really mellowed out since. Sometime around 2001 to 2002, I had an incident in my university dorm laundry room. I can pinpoint the year because my freshman year was the only year our laundry machines took quarters. The following years, the machines accepted a university cash card system. Anyway, I'm a freshman living in the dorm, and it's the weekend. I'm doing laundry. We had an unwritten rule in the laundry room: if you don't attend to your laundry, it's totally fine for someone to pull it out and throw it on the table, wet or dry. If you don't like it, just promptly attend to your laundry when the washer or dryer turns off. I assume it's like this on a lot of campuses. I don't like people touching my laundry, so I always set an alarm to be there when it's done. I wash my clothes, throw them in the dryer, and set my timer. Soon after, my watch goes off, and I walk back to the laundry room, only to find my dryer load completely wet and on the table. Oh, heck no! Somebody pulled my stuff from the dryer just to dump it out and dry their stuff for free. Well, good news, I had more quarters so I could dry my stuff just fine. Actually, I had enough quarters for my anonymous friend too. Why didn't they just ask? So, I grabbed their clothes and threw them into an open washing machine with 6 of my spare quarters. Wait, actually, I can drop another quarter in there for the heavy cycle, which includes an additional rinse and spin. I happen to have another quarter, so I do. The spin cycle takes over an hour and a half to complete. Now's a good time to mention a nice feature the washing machines had that the dryers didn't. They locked while in operation. The person who took my clothes out of the dryer would have been stuck for about 100 minutes, waiting for another chance to dry their clothes. I hope they made better choices the second time. Next story. This happened in 2001. I was a tow truck driver working an overnight shift on a Friday. I received a call around 10 p.m. for a baby locked in a car with the keys inside. According to AAA policy, we prioritize these types of lockout emergency calls over any other calls that may be waiting. I sped down the highway as fast as my truck could take me, hoping the baby wasn't in any danger. When I reached the location, a local mall, I found the car parked in a corner of the parking lot alongside another vehicle. About half a dozen people were hanging around. I jumped out of the truck, identified the owner, and asked him if this was his vehicle. He said, "Yep, sure is." I replied, "Okay, great. Let's see what I can do. Let's get this kiddo free." As I tried to peer into the heavily tinted windows, I saw a glow coming from the stereo and could somewhat make out a blanket in the back seat. The tint was so dark that it was tough to see anything else. I asked, "Is the child in the back seat?" The guy told me, "Yeah, he's asleep though." It took me about a minute to open the passenger's front door. As soon as the locking mechanism clicked, the owner reached in front of me, opened the door, grabbed his keys off the passenger seat, and then picked up a 6-pack of beer from the floor. He stepped back and let out a smug chuckle. I poked my head inside the car and looked into the back seats. There was no baby. This guy had faked an emergency to become a priority. The driver was still standing close to me, twisting off the bottle cap to his beer while holding the keys in the same hand. Instinctively, I snatched his keys, tossed them back into his car, pushed the lock button on the doorframe, and slammed it shut. I said to him, "You can go mess yourself up now. You can stay here all night." As I walked away and got back into my truck, no one said a word to me. The driver just stood there, looking dumbfounded, holding his beer to his chest. I drove away, called dispatch, and explained what happened. They made a note not to send any other drivers to this account for a lockout situation. Guys, I love this petty revenge so much. In my opinion, the original poster should have gotten super petty and called the police at that point to report them for public drinking with the intent to drive. Listen, I enjoy a good beer as much as the next person, but I'm not going to pretend a six-pack is my baby and call a tow truck, acting like it's an emergency when they could be responding to more important calls. Next story. A couple of months ago, during the first half of my workday, my belt broke as I was buckling it back up after using the restroom. At lunch, I had to run to the local Walmart to pick up a cheap replacement until I could buy a higher quality one. I went in, bought a belt, and headed back to my car. As I was putting on the belt while standing at my car, I noticed a car had stopped in the aisle, waiting for me to back out. It was busy and the lot was full, but I had lucked into the first spot next to the handicap space, a prime spot. I guess she got annoyed with the waiting. As I was finishing putting on my belt, she must have thought I was doing something inappropriate in the parking lot in the middle of the day. She rolled down her window and screamed at me, "Hey, do I have to call the police on you?" I said, "What? What are you talking about?" She replied, "Public urination, you know what you're doing." I responded, "Lady, I'm actually not." She interrupted me and said, "You did. I just saw you do it in the parking lot. You are absolutely disgusting." I told her I was just putting on a belt I bought. "Mind your own darn business." To which the Karen said, "Don't you lie to me. You just peed in the parking lot. Now, if you're done, get out of your spot right now. There are people waiting on it." I told her, "Lady, I hope you're not planning on getting this parking spot because you ain't getting it." She replied, "Like heck I ain't. Get out." That's when the standoff began. There was no way I was letting her get this space, even if I had to sit there all afternoon. We sat there for at least 15 minutes, with her even complaining to the cart wrangler and threatening to call the police if I didn't leave. Then I saw my chance. A truck parked about 5 or 6 spots further down the aisle was leaving, and he needed space to back out. She was blocking him. The woman backed up a bit and got closer to the cars on the other side of the aisle so the truck had room to back out. This allowed another car coming up the aisle to get behind the truck. I backed out of the spot quickly as the truck was backing out, and she couldn't get around the truck to take my spot. The car coming up the aisle went around her and got my spot. I circled back around the next aisle to see her reaction. The woman was laying on her horn, got out, and yelled at the driver who pulled into my spot. Her face was red, she was cursing, screaming, the whole 9 yards. The driver just told her to buzz off. In the meantime, another car had taken the space the truck backed out of, so the woman had to keep circling to find a spot. Man, it was sweet. Guys, I don't know anyone who would have happily given up their parking spot to that Karen, especially after that encounter. The funny thing is, if she had been nicer to the original poster, she probably would have gotten that spot no problem. But no. Some people can't seem to keep their mouths shut, right? Next story. Back in June, I left a very toxic workplace after 8 years. I mainly left due to having a breakdown from being overworked, but one particular person made working there even worse on top of the excessive workload. This guy, 1 year younger than me, was a 30-year-old man with a jock-like mentality who seemed to have peaked in secondary school. He was childish and part of my team of 4. I was civil with him because I had to work with him, but he was my workplace bully. Apart from general workplace banter, this guy, who we'll call Chris, was relentless with his teasing. What would usually be playful was always pushed to bullying because he never knew when to quit. If he noticed you were getting stressed or annoyed, he'd target you for the rest of the day. He would be super nice when it was just the two of you, but as soon as he had an audience, he'd pick his victim and tease them constantly in what he called playful behavior. If you got annoyed or stood up for yourself, he'd say he was only messing and act like he was the victim. One specific incident made me lose all respect for him. An ex-employee wrote an aggressive and angry review on Glassdoor about the company. Just because this person used a phrase I sometimes used, Chris thought the review was mine. No matter how much I proved it wasn't me, he was relentless in campaigning around the office that I wrote it. I also believe he told the boss I wrote it, which is why I didn't get any freelance work from them after I left. After I left, my old team still had a group WhatsApp chat that I was part of, and we talked almost every day. After I left, the group chat went quiet, and I assumed they made a new one, which was fair. But the chat still continued occasionally. I unfollowed and unfriended Chris on Facebook and Instagram because I didn't want to be associated with him anymore. In the middle of the group chat, he suddenly broadcasted, "Hey, why did you unfollow and unfriend me on Facebook?" He sent this message at 6:30 a.m. I woke up to this message in the group chat, and it ticked me off. I was honest and said he was a bully, and instead of making a big deal, I'd rather just remove him from the equation. I also said it was immature of him to bring it up in the group chat instead of privately. He didn't say anything, just left the group chat and blocked me on everything. The group chat pretty much died after that. I was livid. This guy had set fire to the group chat, saw what I said, and then ran off. I thought it might have been a blessing in disguise because I finally got to say what I wanted, and now I didn't have to acknowledge him ever again. But I was so wrong. 3 months later, my husband and I were walking through town and stopped at a pub to get some food. Lo and behold, I saw Chris there with a new girl I hadn't seen before. Feeling extra confident, I approached him and said, "Hey Chris, long time no see," with a big grin on my face. Chris looked like a deer in headlights, his cheeks turning red. I asked, "How are things going? Are you doing well?" He replied in a normal way, clearly not wanting the conversation to continue, and looking awkward as heck in front of his new girl. That's when the girl asked how we knew each other. I waited for Chris to say we used to work together, then added, "Yeah, it's quite funny really. Chris used to be my workplace bully. He's the reason I struggled financially after I left my old job because he accused me of writing a hostile review about the company, which I proved I didn't do. He lost me a lot of freelance work because of it." Chris was gobsmacked, his face redder than a traffic light. The new girl looked confused and uncomfortable, but neither responded. I didn't want to carry on much longer as it wasn't fair to her, but to add salt to the wound, I said, "So, is this your new girlfriend, Catherine, or is it Georgia, Chris? What happened with Sarah? Someone said you were still with her last week." The girl went from confused to angry in the blink of an eye and stared at Chris. I said, "Oh, whoops. I really put my foot in my mouth, haven't I? I'd better go. It was nice seeing you again, Chris." My husband, while feeling bad for the girl, was very proud that I finally got my closure and revenge on him. It feels amazing. I do feel super petty, but it feels good for there to finally be consequences for this Chris guy being a jerk. Man, I am so happy that the original poster got the last word and left that guy completely speechless. There's nothing to feel bad about. I feel like that's petty revenge turned into a good deed by letting the girl know what kind of guy he really is. Next story. Many moons ago, I moved into a second-floor apartment when I was 21 years old. It was a nice place in a decent part of town. Not long after I moved in, I noticed one of my second-floor neighbors kept trying to look into my living room through any possible gap past my curtains. To give you context, here's the layout of the apartment. From front to back, I had a sunroom fully inside the house that got a lot of light and faced the street and the neighbors across. Past the sunroom was the living room, followed by the kitchen, then a hallway leading to the bathroom and both bedrooms. The master bedroom, at the back, also led to a porch. Back to the story. I was always nice to everyone and would chat here and there with most of the neighbor ladies, who were all kind, except for one. This woman thought she was the queen of the street and always had to know what everyone was doing. She constantly tried to look through my windows to see what was going on in my apartment. She was about 65 years old, and I'd always see her craning her neck to peer in. I tried to ask her to stop, but I couldn't catch her in time, and she never answered her door. Finally, after about 6 months of this, I decided to give her something to look at. One morning I took a shower, put on a robe, and went out to the sunroom. My curtains were still closed, as I closed them at night. I peeked through to make sure no one was out, but mainly to check if she was trying to look into my house. Sure enough, there she was, trying to peer through my closed curtains. Still in my robe, I opened the curtains and saw her again trying to look into my apartment. That's when I opened my robe in full view in the middle of the window. I thought she was going to have a heart attack. Her face contorted, and she grabbed her chest. Of course, being a Karen, she called the cops to try to get me arrested, claiming I flashed her. The cops showed up at her place and then came to mine. I had gotten dressed by this time, so I went downstairs to talk to them, knowing what this was about. The first cop said, "Yeah, we got a report of you standing naked in front of your window." I replied, "Yeah, you want to know why? I'll tell you. Ever since I moved into my apartment, that old hag has been darn near breaking her neck trying to look into my place every day. My roommate and I have tried to ask her to stop, but she never answers her door. I finally got tired of her being a peeping Tom, so I gave her something to look at. And before you say anything, no one was around when I did it. It's not my fault she was trying to look into my place." The two cops started laughing their heads off. The first cop said, "Okay, I'll go talk to her and say she can actually be arrested for peeping and making a false report. Do you want to pursue charges?" I said, "No, I think she learned her lesson, but if she does it again, it'll be a little more than she's going to bargain for." The second cop laughed again, and they left. They walked across the street, and about 10 minutes later I saw them get into their cruiser, still laughing. She never tried to look into my house again. If you want to break your neck to look into my house like you think you can, don't be surprised at what you see, and don't complain when I finally get tired of it and flash you. Guys, The audacity of that woman to call the cops on the original poster after she repeatedly tried to creep on their home. Seriously, I have no idea what her fascination was with snooping around their house. I'm surprised she hadn't been confronted and taught a lesson before that. If I saw a creepy woman constantly trying to look into my house, I wouldn't wait 6 months to deal with it, I'll tell you that. Next story, I've lived in a townhouse for the last 3 years with my husband and my two 60-pound dogs. For some background, I got attacked by a dog just before my neighbors moved in 2.5 years ago, which left me with a fear of strange animals until recently, when I worked through my trauma with my therapist. My neighbors have 4 loud and reactive dogs, 3 Chihuahuas and 1 Australian Shepherd. They always charge the fence when they see someone on the other side and bark constantly. This prevented me from using my backyard for the last 2 summers. Now that I've worked past the panic attacks and fear, I'm spending most of my weekends in my yard and letting my dogs go back and forth freely. My dogs are well socialized and don't care about the fence when the other dogs are reacting. Up until yesterday, when the neighbors' dogs came out, I would bring my dogs inside, but it would still take a minute or so for their dogs to calm down. I'd let my dogs back out to play when the neighbors' dogs went inside, which was no big deal to me. Cue Sunday. The neighbors let their dogs out, they reacted, and I brought my dogs in, the same old routine. Except this time, my neighbor cursed under her breath and said, "Keep your freaking door shut." This got under my skin, so I've started to be a little petty. Now when the neighbors let their dogs out, I stay out and play fetch with my dogs while her animals go completely bonkers, instead of bringing my dogs inside, as I've always done. My dogs love it because they're getting more exercise than before. It's only been 3 days and my neighbor is exasperated that she has to chase her dogs around the garden. I have patio furniture being delivered tomorrow, and I fully expect to enjoy my yard to the fullest this summer. After a week or 2, I'll probably put up a visual barrier so her dogs can't see mine, just to be nice. But I'm not going to restrict my well-trained animals for her untrained ones any longer. If you don't appreciate my courtesy, I won't give it. You should be able to enjoy your darn backyard whenever you want, right? The original poster later updated, saying their neighbors cussed them out and told them to go inside last night. They told them no, but put the dogs inside because the neighbors were being aggressive. The neighbors said their dogs shouldn't be outside and should stay inside. They shouted at the original poster to get the heck inside, and the original poster replied, "Make me," which was a bit childish, I know. One of the neighbors then told them to meet them out front, and the original poster said, "No, if you want something from me, climb over the fence yourself." They yelled a bit more, but the original poster didn't respond, and they went inside after a minute. I think the neighbors have finally cracked a bit, and it's only been 1 week. I'm not proud, and honestly, I don't want to deal with this nonsense, but I'm not going to bend over backward for a bully. If I were the original poster, my dogs would never go inside again. They're outdoor dogs now. Of course, I'd set up a full dog house and make sure they have everything they need to be comfortable, but you guys know what I'm getting at. Next story? Here's my story. I got a job as an EMT after a 6-month community college training course. I was woefully unqualified and barely knew the basics, but the teacher kept saying, "Don't worry, the new job will train you when you're hired." I got hired at an ambulance transport company that took people to dialysis and similar appointments, not emergency services. But there was no training. I was told to figure it out myself, and I quickly realized this wasn't a fit. I continued to try, but on day 4 I was let go. I had worked 4 days in total. I signed a paper with the reasons they were firing me, all of which I agreed with, so I signed. I asked if they had my check ready, and the man doing the paperwork said they didn't but would send it to me. Not exactly legal, but okay. I waited and no check came. I called a few times to see where it was, knowing they were supposed to get it to me quickly by law. The boss lady was so rude, she would often hang up on me or not take my calls. When I did get someone, they'd say, "We'll mail it." At that point, I started researching labor laws because it was getting ridiculous. I found out they have to give me a day's pay for every day my check is late, which was about $150. So I stopped calling and started waiting. I finally got a check, but it was a payroll check, and it turns out I had worked 2 days in one pay period and 2 days in the next. I called again to tell them, and I got yelled at by the boss lady. I waited another 2 weeks, got my last check, and filed a claim with the labor board for not getting my final paycheck in the time allowed by law. It had been a month by then. The first meeting was a mediation where we tried to settle. The boss lady wasn't having it. She kept saying she didn't owe me anything and offered $500, claiming this was all a setup by me. I knew they owed me closer to $3,000 and she didn't have a leg to stand on, so I refused. She stomped out and said I'd be hearing from her lawyer. We went before a labor judge, and this time the boss lady had done her research. She used every excuse an employer could use for not paying me the last check. She said I moved, claimed I never tried to call them, and said they tried to call me numerous times. She also said she tried to call me to get my address, but my number had changed. She claimed her husband was a cop, that she was an honest person, and that I was a liar who did this intentionally. She also said I purposely didn't clock in, that the times were messed up, and listed a ton of reasons why I was fired, none of which were on the paper they made me sign. The judge called her out on that. I went home, printed my phone records, highlighted all the calls, got a letter from my landlord saying I hadn't moved, and took it back to the labor board. I didn't get to see the judge again, so I don't know if the judge saw it, but I won the case. The judge added 4 days because the last check was sent on a Friday before a 3-day weekend. I was only supposed to be paid until the postmark date, but I got paid until the following Tuesday, which was over $3,000. Also, the boss lady wasn't paying the ambulance drivers double overtime after 12 hours, so I let it slip while I was in the mediator's office. She said she'd look into it, and I hope they did. Holy cow, guys, talk about a huge win for the original poster. I'll never get tired of reading about bosses who don't pay up and end up costing themselves a ton more. These stories of entitled behavior and clever comebacks had me hooked, each one a mix of frustration and satisfying revenge. In the first, I couldn't stop laughing at the road-raging sports car driver stuck waiting for a non-existent cop. I love how the OP's commanding presence flipped the guy's smugness into panic without ever claiming to be a cop. Pure genius. Imagining him waiting 45 minutes is the cherry on top. The Marine neighbor's story was wild. Their petty complaints were bad enough, but poisoning the OP's salsa plants? That's war. The ant invasion via syrup ice cubes was a brilliant, calculated move. I felt their glee watching the chaos unfold, though I'd have stopped short of raccoon reinforcements. That's next-level escalation. The restaurant hostess's petty revenge on the rude Karen was bold but a bit cruel. Seating her in a too-small booth felt like a low blow, targeting her size for humiliation. I get the frustration after a long shift, but I'd have preferred a verbal clapback over public shaming. The dorm laundry incident was perfect petty revenge. Restarting the culprit's wash on a heavy cycle with locked machines? Chef's kiss! I chuckled, imagining their confusion, stuck waiting over an hour for their clothes. The tow truck driver's quick thinking with the fake baby lockout was gold. Locking the guy's keys back in his car was a deserved slap for abusing emergency services. I agree, calling the cops for public drinking would have been the ultimate mic drop. The Walmart parking lot standoff had me cheering. The Karen's wild accusation of public urination was absurd, and the OP's refusal to yield the spot was perfect. Watching her lose it as someone else snagged the space was so satisfying. The workplace bully story hit home. Confronting Chris publicly and exposing his behavior was cathartic. I felt the OP's triumph, especially hinting at his cheating, petty but justified. The nosy neighbor getting flashed was hilarious. Her relentless snooping earned that shock, and I loved the cops laughing it off. She learned her lesson without real harm. The dog owner's backyard saga resonated. After accommodating rude neighbors, the OP's petty shift to letting their dogs play freely was fair. I'd have done the same, though I'd add that visual barrier sooner for peace. Finally, the EMT's labor board win was glorious. The boss's lies unraveled spectacularly, and the OP's patience paid off with a $3,000 check. Dropping that overtime hint was a boss move. Hope those drivers got justice too. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our Petty Revenge series. I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, please leave a like. If you missed the last episode of our Petty Revenge series, go check it out if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one. I love you all.